Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. My name's Corey. I let my wife's parents use part of our backyard to do a little gardening. They had just retired and they visit often. Why not let them have a small patch to plant some vegetables and herbs? I didn't think twice about it. Fast forward a year, and I found myself not even allowed to set foot in. I never imagined things would get this far. And when I finally realized just how far they were willing to go, I decided I had to draw the line. What I did next, trust me, they didn't see it coming. Here's how it all went down. We were having our first dinner with Bethany's parents at the new house one weekend. We'd only just moved in, and everything still felt a bit surreal. There was this buzz of excitement. This house was closer to Bethany's parents, which meant they could visit more often, and they had. That weekend was one of their first visits since we got the keys. Dinner was simple. We were seated around the dining table. The conversation bounced around from the neighborhood to the local grocery options to how we were adjusting. But somewhere in between the laughter and stories, the topic shifted to gardening. Bethany's dad mentioned, almost offhandedly, how they'd always wanted to have a small garden after retiring. Her mom nodded slowly, her expression softening with a bit of sadness, saying how their apartment complex didn't allow tenants to grow anything outside, not even a few pots on the balcony. That caught me off guard a little. They looked genuinely disappointed, like they were still trying to come to terms with how different life had become post-retirement. You could see it in their faces, the longing to do something simple but fulfilling with their time. I've known them for over 5 years by then, since Bethany and I got married. And I've never seen them that downcast. I didn't grow up with a big family, so when I married Bethany, it felt nice to be part of one that was close-knit. Her parents had always been kind to me. They weren't just in-laws. They felt like actual parents. They were also the ones who introduced us to the real estate agent who eventually helped us land this house. In many ways, they played a key role in helping us build this next chapter. So, in that moment, I spoke without even thinking twice. I told them they could use a portion of the backyard if they really wanted to try gardening. That way, they'd have more than enough room to grow whatever herbs or vegetables they had in mind. And I'd still have the rest of the yard for barbecues, space to relax, maybe even set up a little fire pit down the line. It seemed like a balanced solution. Their whole demeanor changed right away. It was like someone had lifted a weight off their shoulders. You could tell it meant a lot. Bethany, my wife, was proud of me, and I felt good about the whole thing. At that time, it actually felt like a beautiful way to bring the family closer. An agreement was made. The back 30% of the yard was theirs to garden however they liked, and the remaining 70% would stay mine to use however I saw fit. But as I would learn later, gestures from the heart can sometimes be taken for granted. After we agreed they could use the back portion, I didn't just walk away. I got my hands dirty. I helped build raised garden beds from scratch, cutting the wood, drilling, and assembling everything one weekend with my father-in-law. I even looked up how to install a drip irrigation system to make watering easier for them. It wasn't cheap, but I figured it was an investment in family. I ordered a delivery of compost, too, that I unloaded myself and helped spread out with them. I'm not going to lie, it felt wholesome and productive. The early days were genuinely nice. There was this light, warm energy in the house. Everyone was smiling, and the whole vibe was easy. My in-laws would stop by whenever they felt like it. Sometimes I'd come home and they were already out there planting or watering. Sometimes even inside, grabbing a snack or borrowing a tool. I didn't mind because every family should share and support each other. Of course, I didn't know that would slowly start to change. But in those early days, it really did feel like we were all on the same page. And maybe that's what made the shift harder to process when it came. Within a few months, I began to notice gradual changes. We had agreed that my in-laws would have 30% of the yard for their garden, just enough space for them to plant what they wanted. It seemed like everyone was respecting that. But then, little by little, things started to change. One morning, I stepped outside and realized the garden had somehow grown beyond the line we had talked about. Rows of vegetables, once neatly tucked into their corner, were now pushing into open lawn space that was supposed to stay clear. I wondered why they would cross that line. Was it a mistake? Did they forget what we agreed on? I didn't say anything. I figured maybe it was unintended and hoped it would stop there. But the changes didn't stop. In fact, they started stacking up. One day, I noticed decorative stones laid out in neat little paths through their section of the yard, except those paths extended into what used to be my open area. Then came a small greenhouse that they set up. No one told me it was coming, and no one asked if I was okay with it. And it didn't end there. Not long after that, they installed a bird bath. Again, no heads up, no conversation. Just another item appearing in a position that wasn't assigned for it. But the one that really got me was the compost bin. I walked out one weekend, ready to start up the grill, and there it was right next to my grilling station. The smell hit me immediately. Food scraps, garden waste, all baking in the sun, just a few feet from where I cook. Still, I didn't say anything. Instead, I tried to rationalize it. They're old. They're excited about their garden. It's probably not personal. But each time I stayed quiet, something chipped away inside me. Then one afternoon, I was outside pruning a branch, which is nothing new. I've always taken care of that tree. It sits right near the dividing area between their garden and the rest of the yard. I was just snipping a few overgrown limbs when Bethany's mother walked over. She just gently placed her hand on my arm and said, "Oh, best to leave it. My husband's been shaping the tree in a specific way." I stood there, shears in hand, caught off guard. A tree I'd always trimmed, without question, was suddenly off limits. That moment hit me harder than I expected. But even then, I nodded and stepped away from a branch. A week later, I had this small barbecue planned. It was for me and a few coworkers I'd been working with on a brutal 3-month project that finally wrapped. We hit a milestone. Naturally, I wanted to celebrate a little. I told Bethany about it, and she didn't seem to have an issue, but then her mother got wind of it. She pulled me aside and said, in this almost scolding tone, "A barbecue? You'll trample the new herbs. They're very delicate. We just put in lavender and some thyme. They need space and quiet to settle in." I blinked. "We'll stay off the garden beds," I told her. "We'll be on the patio. It's a few people, not a football game." But the conversation didn't go anywhere. It was like talking to a fence post. No compromise, just passive resistance hidden behind a smile and a comment about how I wouldn't understand. Still, I figured it was just a disagreement. Nothing I couldn't work around. I went inside to respond to a few emails and take a Zoom call for a short remote meeting. Maybe 20 minutes, tops. When I came back, Bethany was sitting on the couch like nothing had happened. That night, I checked my phone to follow up with one of the guys about the barbecue plans. I realized that there was a message from my phone telling them the get-together was canceled. I scrolled, confused, then looked at Bethany. "Hey, did you touch my phone?" She said, "Yeah, I canceled the barbecue. It's not a good time. You'd just be stressing out my parents. It's their space now. You never even liked the garden before." I just stared at her, completely floored. Their space. I asked, "You mean the space I offered them?" She shrugged. "You never cared about it before. Why now?" That was when I knew that I was being undermined in my house. That was the day I stopped pretending it was just a misunderstanding, and I've let things go too far. Weeks later, I stepped out into the backyard one Sunday morning. It should have been a calm start to the day. I just wanted a few quiet minutes before the day kicked off. But as I took a step forward onto the grass, something caught my eye and froze me mid-step. Right near the raised beds my in-laws had made was a metal stake. It was driven into the ground. Hanging from it was a laminated sign, swaying slightly in the breeze. I stepped closer to see it better. What was written is, "Private property. Do not enter." I was completely stunned, trying to wrap my head around what I was looking at. Private property? In my backyard? I pay this mortgage. And now, there's a literal sign telling me not to enter part of my own yard? I bent down and yanked the stake right out of the dirt. I walked over to the patio, still gripping the sign, and sat down hard on one of the chairs. Then I heard the back door slide open. Bethany walked out. She saw me holding the sign, and without missing a beat, she asked, "Did you touch their sign?" I turned to her, eyebrows raised, and said, "Their sign? In my backyard?" She rolled her eyes and told me not to be dramatic, that the sign was just to keep people off their beds. I asked her, "What people?" I asked, "Who else is even in this yard?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to, because nothing she will say will ever make sense to me. That same day, after pulling that ridiculous private property sign out of the ground, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hardware store. I got metal stakes, string, and bright orange boundary markers. When I got home, I went straight to the backyard. I walked the yard carefully, measuring with my eyes and memory. I still remember the exact area we agreed upon when I first offered the space to Bethany's parents. That had been the deal. But over time, they had crept way past it. So I started driving the stakes into the ground, stringing them together one by one until a clear, unmistakable line ran through the yard. After I was done, I called Bethany's parents and asked them to come over. When they arrived, I simply pointed to the string and said, "This is the original boundary we agreed on. From now on, I don't want anyone going past it without asking me first." The look on their faces told me they weren't used to hearing that kind of tone from me. Bethany came outside while I was speaking. She didn't like it one bit. She jumped in quickly, asking why I was doing this, saying I was overreacting and making a big deal out of nothing. I just turned to her and said, "Bethany, the deed is in my name. This is my home. I let them use the space out of kindness, not obligation." And that was it. I didn't wait for their approval or argue any further. My wife's parents didn't take it well at all. When I told them they couldn't cross the new line without permission, they left angry. But that was only the start of the fallout. At first, Bethany didn't say much, but I could feel her growing cold and distant toward me. She stopped making eye contact during dinner and kept her answers short when I tried to talk to her about anything. I knew she was caught between her parents and me, but I wasn't going back on my words. Eventually, we had to talk. She came at me with sharp words, accusing me of disrespecting her parents. She demanded that I apologize for what I had done. I didn't back down. I looked her straight in the eye and told her firmly, "If you're not okay with that, we might as well end the marriage." The words hung heavy in the room, but I meant every one of them. Bethany was stunned. I could see it in her face. She never thought I would take the breakup seriously. For a long time after that, she kept giving me the cold shoulder. But when she realized I really didn't care anymore, that I wasn't going to bend or back down, her attitude began to soften. Gradually, she started coming back to the way she used to be. It wasn't an easy time for either of us, but standing my ground made one thing clear. I wasn't willing to be pushed out of my own home. After everything that had happened with the garden and the sign, I started to notice a clear change in how Bethany's parents acted around me. They didn't come around when I was home anymore. It was like they were avoiding me completely, showing up only during the times I was at work. It wasn't a coincidence. The warmth and friendliness from before had cooled down into something distant and polite, but with a clear edge of avoidance. For months after that, the garden they had taken over sat mostly abandoned. Weeds grew taller than before, and the beds looked messy. It was like they were making a silent protest, refusing to put in the work until they felt respected, or maybe until things settled down. But eventually, they did come back to tend to the garden again. Only this time, they were careful about it. They showed up quietly, working on the plants when they thought I wouldn't be around. No more dropping by for chats or helping themselves to the house. It was like they had accepted the boundary I set, but were still trying to hold onto their little corner without causing a direct confrontation. Sitting back and thinking about all of it, I realize now how much worse things could have gotten if I hadn't finally put my foot down. At first, I just wanted to be a good husband and son-in-law, giving them a space to enjoy their retirement hobby. But sometimes, when people cross your boundaries little by little, it's easy to lose control of what's yours. I learned that standing your ground isn't about being harsh or angry. It's about respect. Respect for yourself and for what you built. If I hadn't acted, I don't know how far they would have taken that garden or what else they would have taken from me. Still, I hold on to a bit of hope. Someday, all of us will be able to enjoy the backyard together again. We'll probably sit outside on a Sunday morning, having brunch, laughing, and sharing stories like a family should. For now, though, I'm just taking it one day at a time. Thanks for watching. If you've been through something similar or just found this story interesting, drop a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like and share if you want to hear more stories like this. I appreciate you sticking around, and I'll see you next time.